Emily Carter was 8 months pregnant when she climbed into her boss, Greg Wilson's truck, and vanished without a trace, leaving behind a silent room filled with folded baby clothes, and a town that would soon discover the horrifying truth hiding behind Greg's promises to help her start a new life. 19-year-old Emily Carter had a quiet, ordinary life in the small town of Elmswood, Illinois, where everyone knew each other's business. She was in her second year of community college, studying to become a veterinary technician, and worked evenings at Miller's Auto Repair to save up for her baby's arrival. Emily was 8 months pregnant, her belly round under the oversized hoodies she wore, and she often kept her hand resting on it when she talked about how excited she was to meet her baby. She lived with her mother, who worked long shifts at a diner to cover rent and bills, and the two shared a small, cluttered apartment above a laundromat. They didn't have much, but Emily's mother said they would find a way to manage, and Emily believed her. Her days were filled with school assignments, long hours at work, cleaning tools and answering calls, and folding tiny onesies she had bought from thrift stores in the evenings, imagining her baby wearing them. Soon, one Tuesday morning in May, the alarm on Emily's phone kept ringing, but no one turned it off. Her mother walked into her room, expecting to see Emily getting ready for class, but found the bed empty. Emily's backpack was gone, but her phone was on the pillow next to her blanket, buzzing with missed calls and unread messages. Her keys were missing, but her wallet was still on the small nightstand, and the cup of tea she had made the night before sat cold on the windowsill. At first, her mother thought Emily might have gone for a walk or stepped out for breakfast, but as the hours passed, a cold fear settled in her chest. Emily always left notes, even for quick errands, and she never missed her prenatal appointments or skipped work without telling her mother. By noon, Emily's mother called the police, reporting her daughter missing. She also called Emily's workplace, hoping she had gone there early, but they said she hadn't shown up. It was then she found out that Greg Wilson, Emily's 32-year-old boss, hadn't come to work that day either. The police found Emily's old, red sedan abandoned at a gas station near the highway, unlocked, with a half-empty water bottle in the cuffholder and the driver's seat pushed back as if someone else had driven it. Her mother stood near the car, crying as officers checked it for any signs of where Emily had gone. But there were no obvious clues, no note, no signs of struggle, just an eerie emptiness. Neighbors started gathering outside the apartment, whispering as officers walked in and out with notepads. Someone mentioned seeing Greg's truck parked down the street late the previous night, and another said they saw Emily carrying a small bag, looking anxious. Around the same time, her mother insisted Emily would never leave without telling her, especially with the baby due in just a few weeks. She told the officers how Emily had been making lists of baby names and had been folding baby clothes the night before, how excited she was to become a mother, how she would never abandon her child. As the sun set that day, Emily's room remained untouched, with a small crib in the corner and folded baby clothes on a chair, waiting for a baby that might never come home. As night fell, flyers with Emily's photo were printed and shared on social media, asking for any information about her whereabouts. The town's small community came together, organizing a search party to check the nearby woods, rivers, and abandoned buildings, calling her name into the night air, hoping to find her safe. But there was no trace of Emily, and her disappearance began to feel like the opening of a nightmare no one in the town could wake from, leaving her family terrified of what might have happened in the dark hours when no one was watching. 2 days after Emily's disappearance, the town was already buzzing with rumors and fear, as missing posters clung to poles and windows like ghosts, reminding everyone of what was lost. The police released CCTV footage showing Emily at an ATM with Greg Wilson the night before she vanished. She wore a gray hoodie pulled over her head, her face pale under the harsh security lights, and Greg stood close, shielding the screen with his body as she withdrew a few $100s. The footage ended with the two walking back to Greg's truck, Emily glancing back toward the camera before climbing in. That single glance became the center of endless speculation, with people arguing whether it was a look of fear or a simple acknowledgement of the camera. Before leaving .as, investigators began digging. They discovered that Greg had been visiting Emily's house often under the pretext of dropping her off after work. Some neighbors recalled seeing his truck parked outside late at night, sometimes for hours, but no one thought it was strange enough to report. Emily's friends came forward, saying she had seemed distracted and worried in the days before she disappeared. She had stopped talking about baby names and had gone silent during lunch breaks, staring at her phone or looking out the window as if waiting for something. She didn't say much, only that she was tired and had things to figure out before the baby arrived. Greg's wife, Anna Wilson, had also reported him missing, stating that he took a large sum of money from their joint account and hadn't returned home. She told police that Greg had been acting strange, working late, and sometimes coming home with oil stains on his clothes that didn't match his usual shift hours. She found receipts for camping gear and fuel containers in his jeans pockets, but assumed he was preparing for a fishing trip to clear his head before the baby arrived. It wasn't until he didn't come home and she saw Emily's missing posters that she connected the dots, realizing that the girl her husband employed and the missing pregnant student were the same person. As days turned into a week, the small town began to split into theories, each one more desperate than the last. Some believed Emily had willingly run away with Greg to escape the stress of impending motherhood and a strict household. Others were convinced she had been manipulated by Greg, who saw her vulnerability and took advantage of her need for support. There were whispers that Emily was in love with Greg, and others said Greg had threatened her, forcing her to leave with him while she was too afraid to resist. Emily's mother held on to the belief that her daughter would never leave without a word and that something terrible must have happened to keep her away. Meanwhile, the police continued to search, checking Greg's credit card statements and finding purchases at gas stations and small motels along highways heading north. They tracked down people who had seen Greg's truck, but none who had seen Emily with him after that ATM footage. The tension in the town grew heavier with each day, as Emily's absence became a constant ache, and the unanswered question of whether she was safe or suffering somewhere kept people awake at night. Social media became filled with hashtags and calls for tips, her face shared over and over, each post a prayer for her safe return. Yet behind every shared post, there was an unspoken fear, creeping into the minds of those who once believed they were safe, that something darker and more sinister was happening to a girl who had been planning for a baby, who had been folding tiny clothes and writing down names, only to vanish into the unknown with her boss, leaving behind a silence that grew louder with each passing day. The third week without Emily was a heavy, aching stretch of time that made even the most hopeful neighbors lower their voices when her name was mentioned. The search efforts had grown into a routine, with volunteers gathering at the local community center each morning to map out the woods, abandoned barns, and old roads surrounding Elmswood. They moved in lines, calling her name into the thick air of summer, stepping carefully around broken branches and muddy ditches, praying to find even a small sign, a piece of clothing, a dropped item, anything to prove Emily was still out there. Her mother came every morning, clutching Emily's photo against her chest, her eyes red but determined, refusing to stop looking. Meanwhile, the police were tracking Greg's movements through scattered surveillance footage and credit card transactions. Each lead felt like a thin thread in a dark room, pulling them from one gas station camera to the next, trying to stitch together where Greg had taken Emily. His truck was spotted on a highway camera at 3 in the morning, heading north out of Illinois. Days later, a motel manager in Wisconsin reported seeing a man matching Greg's description paying cash for a room, but there was no mention of a pregnant girl with him. Another tip led investigators to a small diner where a waitress claimed she saw a young woman who looked like Emily, sitting alone, staring at a cup of coffee while a man argued on the phone nearby. When police reviewed the footage, the girl's face was hidden, and they couldn't confirm if it was Emily or another young woman passing through. Emily's social media remained untouched, her last post a photo of a tiny pair of baby socks folded neatly on her pillow with a caption about how soon she would meet her little one. Her inbox filled with desperate messages from friends and family, each one unread, their blue ticks a painful reminder of the silence swallowing the hope her family clung to. Her room remained untouched, the crib standing empty in the corner, with its soft yellow blanket folded at the edge, the stuffed rabbit she loved as a child, waiting for the baby she had once spoken of with such excitement. Tension in the town turned to frustration, with rumors swirling that the police weren't doing enough, that they should have found Greg and Emily by now, that maybe Emily didn't want to be found. Some people whispered that maybe Emily had escaped an unhappy home, running with Greg to start a new life before the baby came. Others believed she had been taken against her will, tricked into leaving with promises of help, only to find herself trapped far from home. Her mother spoke to reporters, her voice shaking but clear, insisting that Emily would never abandon her baby, that she was a good girl who had trusted the wrong person, and that every moment she was gone was another moment of fear for what might happen to her and the child she carried. The case gained attention in nearby town, with missing posters spreading on storefronts and social media. Candlelight vigils were held in front of the community center, people gathering to pray for Emily's safe return, their faces glowing under the flickering lights. Each vigil ended with a plea for tips, for someone to come forward with information that could bring Emily home. But as the days dragged on, the air grew heavy with the sense that something was deeply wrong, that the longer Emily was gone, the smaller the chances of bringing her home safely became, leaving behind a hollow fear that nothing would ever be the same again. On a humid morning 31 days after Emily vanished, two hikers cutting through a dense stretch of forest in Minnesota stumbled upon a burned-out truck near a dirt clearing. The smell of charred metal and plastic clung to the air, and the ground was littered with blackened glass and ash. One of the hikers spotted what looked like the outline of a handprint on the scorched driver's door, and they quickly called the authorities. When investigators arrived, they recognized the vehicle immediately from the missing persons bulletins. It was Greg Wilson's truck, the same one last seen heading north with Emily on highway cameras in the dark hours of the morning she disappeared. Inside the truck, amidst the melted plastic and warped metal, two bodies were found. The first was confirmed to be Greg, the second, Emily. The medical examiner's report revealed the grim details that the town had feared but tried to deny. Emily had died from blunt force trauma to her head before the fire. Her life ended before the flames consumed the truck. Greg's cause of death was determined to be smoke inhalation, indicating he was alive as the fire spread, trapped inside the burning vehicle as it became his tomb. The discovery shattered the last fragile hope that Emily might still come home to cradle her baby in the nursery she had prepared with folded onesies and a soft yellow blanket. As investigators sifted through the debris, they found a torn and half-burned notebook in the glove compartment. It was Greg's, filled with scribbled notes, receipts, and calculations, alongside a disturbing, scrawled message that read, "I couldn't let it happen." The words felt like a twisted riddle, and the police worked to piece together what Greg had meant and what he had planned. Evidence emerged that Greg had taken out a fraudulent life insurance policy under Emily's name just a month before she disappeared, listing himself as the beneficiary. It was a shocking revelation that pointed to premeditation, and detectives began to believe Greg had intended to profit from Emily's death, exploiting her vulnerability as a young, pregnant woman desperate for help. Inside Greg's burned wallet, authorities found receipts for camping supplies, fuel, and rope, alongside the motel keys where he had stayed alone, building a trail of movements that painted a dark picture of planning and evasion. They found no signs that Emily had ever checked into the motels with him, leading investigators to suspect she may have been hidden in the truck, frightened and isolated, in the days before her death. Witnesses who had thought they saw her were likely mistaken, holding on to the hope of seeing a missing girl alive while she was already in a dangerous situation she could not escape. The town of Elmswood received the news with collective grief that turned the quiet streets into spaces of mourning. Emily's mother collapsed upon hearing the confirmation that her daughter and her unborn grandchild were gone forever, taken in a violent and selfish act that none could fully comprehend. A memorial was held in the local church, where neighbors left white flowers and baby toys in memory of Emily and the child she would never hold. The soft rattle of a toy rolling down the church steps, echoing louder than any words of comfort could. The discovery of the truck in the woods marked the end of the search, but it opened a deeper wound in the hearts of those who loved Emily, leaving behind a sharp, hollow ache that would haunt the town for years to come. The town of Elmswood felt different after Emily's funeral, as if the streets themselves were holding their breath, waiting for life to return to normal, even though everyone knew it never truly would. The horrible truth of what happened to Emily settled like a dark stain over the community that once believed it was safe, where neighbors waved from their porches, and parents let their children ride bikes until the streetlights flickered on. Now, parents watched the roads carefully, and people double-checked locked doors, whispering about how Emily had trusted someone she shouldn't have, how a young girl with her whole life ahead of her was taken so violently before she could even hold her baby. As the investigation closed, it was clear that Greg Wilson had exploited Emily's fear and uncertainty. She had confided in him about how worried she was about raising a baby alone, how she wanted to finish her education but couldn't see a way forward, and how she didn't want to be a burden on her mother. Greg used these confessions to convince Emily to leave with him under the promise that he would help her start a new life somewhere safe, a place where she could raise her child away from judgment and financial hardship. But those promises were empty, and as she climbed into his truck that night, clutching a small bag with her baby's clothes, she did not know she was stepping into her own grave. The notebook found in the burned truck revealed Greg's twisted logic, with pages detailing how he believed he could claim the insurance money and start fresh while ridding himself of the responsibility of Emily's pregnancy and the chaos it brought into his life. The final scribbled words, "I couldn't let it happen," revealed his intent to stop Emily from having the baby she had spent months preparing for, taking away her future and silencing her forever. It was not a crime of passion, nor a tragic accident, but a calculated betrayal rooted in greed and cowardice, ending in a fire meant to erase the evidence of his crimes. Emily's mother, holding onto the few pieces of clothing her daughter had left behind, found herself in a world she did not recognize. A world where her daughter and grandchild were memories instead of living beings. She decided that Emily's story could not simply end in the flames that took her life. She began speaking at schools and community centers, telling Emily's story to warn other young women about the dangers of manipulation and the importance of seeking help from those who truly cared, not those who promised salvation while hiding dark intentions. She would hold up Emily's photo, the one where she was smiling, her hand resting on her rounded belly, and remind everyone that behind every missing poster was a real person with dreams and plans, someone who deserved to be protected. The town eventually returned to its daily rhythms, but small reminders of Emily remained, from the flyers still peeling off telephone poles to the empty crib in her mother's room that would never be filled. Her story became a quiet cautionary tale whispered among parents and teachers, a reminder that danger can wear a familiar face and that trust, once broken, can leave scars deeper than anyone can see. Emily Carter's life ended before it truly began, and the baby she was ready to love would never know the mother who folded tiny clothes and wrote down baby names in a notebook, planning for a future that was stolen by someone she thought she could trust, leaving a town forever changed by the horrible truth that struck everyone in the end.